Just a quick thanks to Michael for that great talk. I think Docker planned this pretty well to put us back to back here. So all kinds of awesome tools there with things like the dive tool and just looking into how those layers work. What I'm going to get into is taking a lot of those images that you're building, a lot of the big images out there, and potentially pulling down from other places like Docker Hub and start to maintain a local registry mirror. So my Twitter handle there, sudo_bimage, I'm going to have that on the bottom of a lot of the pages. And I've got a GitHub repo here, sudo-bimage instead of the underscore. I've got these slides and also a bunch of content for this because I did structure it a little bit as a workshop for you to try out at home. And so that is all going to be up on the GitHub repo. So who am I real quick? I am a solutions architect for Boxboat. They're an IBM company now, got acquired. I am a Docker captain, and I also answer a whole bunch of questions over on Stack Overflow. In addition to those things that are all usually up there, I've also been the author of RegClient, which is one of the tools will show up in a couple of these slides here. So let's dig into why on earth we would want to maintain a local registry mirror. Well, the big thing is outages happen. And so Cloudflare has an issue, DNS flakes out, BGP starts routing all the traffic to some place in the Middle East, something weird happens there. We want to avoid these external dependencies so that we don't get subjecting ourselves to those outages as best we can. Bandwidth is also a challenge. It's going to cost you both time and money. So the more money you can save and the faster your bills can go, the better, right? And we're hitting Docker Hub so hard, they had to start throwing rate limits at us. So let's be a little nicer to Docker, treat them well, and they can keep this resource free for us as best they can. So that's the obvious answers a lot of people get. And so they will quickly go through and either turn on pull through cache locally, or they'll configure an automatic mirror that's built right into the registry. And I got a few concerns with that. One is that pull through cache is unpredictable. And so it might pull an image and update it at a time you didn't plan on. And there's no option to just revert that. If it pulls and overwrites a tag, it updates it. And so if upstream does something that breaks your build, well, now you got to figure it out whenever that change happened to have occurred. And the other part in there, the control over the images, it's nice if you can control what images. There are people out there that say, hey, we want to pull down these images from upstream, but we want to only pull down images that have been approved by our organization. And so having that control in there, you can specify that if you're the one that's picking up those individual images that you're mirroring. So the original solution a lot of people have seen in the past has been, let me just do a Docker pull, a retag, and a push. And so in this case, I'm taking Alpine and renaming it to localhost 5000/Alpine, and you could then pull it from your local registry. A couple of things that aren't great with that. One, if you've never seen it before, the namespace on all the Docker official images is library. And so when you pull Alpine latest, what you're really pulling from is a repository named docker.io. It's actually slightly different, but I'm going to breeze over that little detail there. If you tell Docker to pull from Docker.io, you're pulling from Docker Hub. And /library is that little prefix to all the Docker official images. And so if we were to try to mirror what's happening upstream, we should have called our local image localhost 5000/library/Alpine latest. That's going to come into play a little bit later. I'll show you why that's important. The other big detail here that's not so great from that previous example, when we do a pull, we dereference that image to just our single local platform. And if we're trying to support multi-architecture images, say you want to have support for those users that are on the Mac M1s and everybody else is on the Intel platforms, or maybe you have a mainframe out there and you're trying to build for some cool stuff. To do that, whenever you do this pull, you dereference it, and then all the images you build off your local mirror can only be on that platform that you pulled specifically. So that's not a great solution there. We're also, if you have ephemeral environments, say you have a CI environment that spins up these instances on an ephemeral instance and then does that Docker pull and push from there, it's going to pull every one of those layers, even if you already have it in the target machine. So it'd be nice if we can make this a lot more efficient and only pull the things that change, only pull the unique stuff. And it's also going to require the full Docker engine to do that pull and push. And if we're just talking to registries, we don't need that full engine. We don't need to run a privileged container, so we can really greatly simplify this. So got a new solution here. And the great thing about when you make a new solution is you realize that there are a lot of other people that have already done this. So I'm not the first to go down some of this path. If you look out there in the world, you've seen Scopio's done this from Red Hat. Google has their project Go Container Registry. They've got a little tool within there called Crane. And then I've been working on my little project called RegClient. And I'll show the RegClient stuff, but just realize you're not tied into this. You can work with some of the other tooling out there that does it similarly. And the API itself that we're using is documented. It's part of the OCI, Open Container Interface, that they've standardized the Docker registry, how you interact with that. And so you can call it directly from there with a bunch of curl commands. The challenge is when you start getting into things like authentication, you realize how complicated this API can get, just trying to manage the tokens going back and forth and getting those credentials set up right. What's going to happen when we start doing these copies with the tooling that I'm going to show off today is we try to avoid those copies of the layers or copies of really anything unless we absolutely need to. And we also have in this little path on the left there that loops over all the manifests, support for doing those multi-architecture images, support for those manifest lists that have more than one image within them. We're going to copy everything and not just the one thing. But only after all those other paths fail and something's not available locally, not available on the same registry server, we could copy between different repositories on the same registry, because you can do that server side. You don't have to actually pull the layer to do that trick. Only when all those things fail do we actually copy a layer from one registry to another. So we get a lot of speed ups by doing that. So I mentioned this is a workshop. There is a link here. I'm actually going to drop this link in the chat for anybody that wants to play along at home. Feel free to spin this up in your own little registry. And if you're not watching the chat and you're watching recording later on, then go ahead and grab this. And again, this is up on my GitHub repo, so feel free to go and check that out. And we'll just go ahead and run through this. So first step, really easy. You can deploy a registry. And it's a big, long command, but what we're doing is we're running a registry version 2 image. And we're going to have a volume in there for all of our storage. So it's got the parameter set in there to say we're going to put everything under this path for the file system and then the volume mounting that file system. I got an extra couple flags in there. One to enable deletes. So we can delete from this registry. By default, they don't allow that. And the validation disabling, that's going to give you support if you ever start doing Windows images. I've run into that in the past. So this is not secure. So I've only got this on the local host. If you try to run this out on other public environment, well, first off, I only publish that port on the local, 127001. But the other important thing is you'll probably want to start adding authentication, other stuff to this. So what does that look like real quick? I'll just show this. You already saw the command before, so I'm not going to spend too long digging into the command itself. But that's just going to pull down a couple layers. They're not too big. This image gets pulled down from a lot of users. And there you go. You're running a registry just like that. Pretty easy, pretty quick. So next thing I want to do is I want to configure a policy for how I mirror these images from Docker Hub to my local environment. And I'm going to do that with a YAML file. It's called regsync.yml. If you're following along the workshop, you'll see that name in there. And the credentials up top are the credentials for how I want to log into Docker Hub. And I also have the ability to change things like the TLS in there. So I turn TLS off on the local host instance because I didn't configure that on my registry either. Really unsecure. But the Docker IO, that's Docker Hub again. I've passed the username and password from external sources. So you'll see me later on. I'll have to set an environment variable and set up a file name with that. The defaults in there is going to apply to all the different things we're going to configure for this mirroring. And so I can configure the rate limits. So this is going to say if I've got fewer than this many pulls left on that target repository that I'm pulling from, I'm going to stop this and I'll retry every 15 minutes to see if that remote registry is telling me I'm allowed to start doing more pulls now. And so this keeps you from running out of pulls from other tasks. So you won't kind of, take away all the pulls just doing a mirror when you might have other production things that really need to do those pulls from upstream. And the backup command there, I really like that one. That tells me that whenever I get ready to overwrite one of my local images, then, you update a tag, something like that, you see a new version of tag upstream. I'm going to keep a backup of this. So now I have a way to go and revert back if something ever goes wrong. So I'm kind of putting that tag in there. And the interval, I'm going to have the ability to just schedule this thing, and it's just going to run every hour with that little 60 minutes there. And then below that is the sync. And the sync is an array of different syncs that I want to run. These are just telling me I want to do this copy command. And I can copy in the first instance just one tag, and the second instance a bunch of tags from repository. And I'm doing BusyBox, and I'm also doing Alpine. And with Alpine, I specified a whole bunch of tags in there I wanted to copy over. There are actually only 2 tags in that whole list, but you'll see that in a little bit. And so this is going to go through and do that synchronization for me. I'll just get to define this in YAML. And if you have another image, you can just add another section here and set that all up. Once you want to test this stuff, we got a couple commands to kick off here. One is I need to specify my username. And so I'm setting that environment variable. I also need to put my hub password. Hopefully you're doing a personal authentication token. And so if you've got that, I just specify that to this file name here. If you change some of these little arguments, these commands, you can pass a different file name if you'd like to. And then the regsync command I mentioned, I was going to pull some reg client commands in here. This is all, this config file is going into reg client. The sub command I'm working with here is called regsync. And I pass in the file name, the way it's configured, that YAML file name. I pass in the hub token in there. I'm using this on the net, the host network, and probably wouldn't do that in a normal production environment. You'd spin up a whole network with all the different containers you're going to run. But for a quick example here, so that I can talk to local hosts, since the registry is only listening on local hosts, I did it this way, but there are other options there if you want to make this a little more secure. The important detail in this command is that very last argument that says once, and that once in there just says run the whole YAML file, do it one time, and then exit. Let me know, do everything and just let me know if it worked. And then when you want to automate that, you change that last argument to server, and you just run this thing with restart flags and the -d to kick it off in the background, those sorts of things. I give it a name. Otherwise, the rest of the commands here are pretty much the same, or arguments. So that was a lot of talking, a lot of slides. Let's see it's actually in operation. I've got the regsync YAML file that we were looking at earlier. It's got the same credentials, the defaults, and the sync. So nothing up my sleeve. It's the same file we were just looking at. I'm now going to specify my username. In case you were curious, it's sudo bmitch, kind of like I do everywhere, although Hub doesn't let you put the dash or the underscore in there, so I had to concatenate all as one word. And then if you don't have a .docker folder, I kind of assume nothing for some of the people trying this out. I specify that. And then I didn't really give you my actual Hub personal access token. I know some people are hoping that I might share that today, but I didn't. And I'm just going to write that into that file, in my home directory .docker, and then with the file name I picked was hub_token. And so I'm going to cancel this because I don't want to actually overwrite my token. That's a good file that I've got there. And here's the command we just saw. So kick that off, and it's going to pull down this regsync image, and you'll see it copying all these layers. And so it's just going to copy a whole bunch of layers, and then also you'll see it copying configs or manifests pulling in there as well. In the very end, you saw it skip a whole bunch of stuff. I mentioned there are only really two. The version 3 and the 3.14 are the same as latest. So it saw that. It knew it didn't have to copy it again. And then what you saw there in the middle of the screen now is I've got the server option. So I just kicked this thing off with the same command, but just changed it from once to server and put it in the background. And now I've got two containers running. I've got my registry server that I kicked off a minute ago, and now I've got the little regsync in there that's constantly updating its stuff. So now no matter what, every hour this thing is checking, I'll have that Alpine image updated. And so now I can use that whenever I want to for all my builds and know that it's constantly staying updated. It's not something I just did once and forgot about. And the mirror itself, if I want to use it, what do my Docker files look like? This is the important part a lot of people want to do. They've got this stuff set up. How do we use it? Well, I mentioned I kept my names of my repos looking the same as upstream, and that's so that all I have to change is one variable in all my Docker files. And so I specify the registry as an argument. I pass it there on the from line using that one argument. I default it to Docker Hub. That way, if I give someone else this Docker file, they don't need to have access to my local mirror. They can just run the build from Docker Hub, and it just works for them. But when I build it and I want to use my local mirror, I pass a build arg. You see that in the bottom half of the screen there. Pass that build arg saying this is registry. And now I do all my builds using my local registry, and the same Docker file works for everybody. I can push my image to my local registry because it's not a pull through cache. I can push to this if I want to. And I'm using my Hub user. I'm trying to keep that same namespace because I don't ever want to get in a situation where I have conflicts there, where I can have two different potential instances of the same image. Maybe someone upstream called it the same thing we called it. So I put everything under my own namespace so that I know that I own all this stuff, all these image names. Let's see this in operation, right? So a whole bunch of commands we saw there. I'm going to show you, here's the Docker file. Here is the Docker build command, I think. Yep. And I pass in that build arg there. So this is going to run using my local mirror. So this is nice and fast because it's using local mirror. And I can push it up to my local mirror. So you see that kind of working. I picked curl here for example. I try to find something that was a simple little hello worldish kind of example. And I'll do a curl on google.com. And nice thing about this curl command is that it gives me a redirect to www.google.com, so it didn't flood the screen with a whole bunch of stuff. So there we go. We just spun up our own local registry. We're now using our own local registry, our own local mirror here. We can do all our builds against this. We've got up and running. Now, we got a whole second half of the talk here, and a lot of the time to spend it on that is talk about garbage collection. Because garbage collection is the process that I see a lot of people that they forget about. They spin up the registry. They're like, okay, it's all great. And eventually, they start filling the hard drive and they're like, we need to clean this thing up. How do we do that? And very importantly, I try to figure out how do I name things so that I can do this right. And what I'll show you here is we're doing those backup files. So I want to make a couple example backups in our registry. And for that, I'm going to use a tool called regctl. And to spin that up, I need to tell it that I don't have TLS configured on my local host. So I'm just using this within a container. So I'm setting an alias up to use a container. Michael does the same thing with his dive tool. It's a great tip. Use it for all the stuff you're doing if you want to simplify your command lines. And then to make some sudo backups here to simulate this thing has been running for a week or so, I'm just running in a for loop a whole bunch of these copy commands to copy the Alpine version 3 and the Alpine latest and the BusyBox latest to have a whole bunch of backups. So I'll give 5 days worth of backups for each one of these things. In the garbage, in the last thing here for the garbage collection in the setup part, I'm just going to list the tags out of this. So the same regctl command, I can query that registry because that registry from the Docker Hub, the image version of it doesn't have any kind of UI that you can go in and query. So this gives you a way you can go and query it and see what's happening inside that registry. All right, back to the demo, back to the command line here, show you those commands we just saw. I am going to change this. I mentioned I was pulling from latest. I'm going to change it for my examples to use Alpine. And that's because I have a couple credential helpers and the Alpine image has the credential helpers in there. And then I'm going to throw in that little TLS disable setting in there so that now my local, all my regctl commands will assume that the local host doesn't have TLS configured. This command normally for me takes about 10 or so seconds to run just because it's going through all those images, but in the recording that gets compressed down to only 2 seconds. So it looked a little bit faster than you normally see it. And the result is now I have 5 tags for the version 3 backup, 5 tags for the latest backup. Those were both on Alpine. Checking BusyBox, I got 5 backup tags for the latest over there. So now I've got my example as if this sync has been running for a while. Now we got these tags building up, building up, building up. We want to clean these things up. So the way I've done that is I got a different config file. There's another YAML file. And I've got similar kind of cred section at the top, but I only need to talk to the local host. So I don't even have the Docker Hub settings in here. I'm configuring this with an interval of it running every hour, similar to that other file. So a lot of these settings here look pretty similar. I've got a lot of copy and paste of code in the back end to implement this. But what I got to was a point saying, okay, well, now I need to define this YAML file for how I want to make a garbage collection policy to clean up old images, clean up old tags. And real quickly, I realized that everybody's going to have a different version. Nobody's going to have the same way they want to do this. And I don't want to make everybody force them into one design if they want to go a different way. So what I ended up doing was I used a Lua scripting language in here. And I'll try to make this simpler later on. For right now, this is kind of what it looks like today, which is I set 3 variables up top. And by doing this, you can kind of set this stuff up top and then copy and paste the rest of the file and don't have to worry about anything else. The 3 variables there are setting the registry to localhost, :5000. Setting a backup expression there. It's kind of like a regex, but Lua is slightly different, but close enough. You can pretty much read that and realize they're doing something similar there. Where I'm saying look for the backup string followed by whatever that first tag is, followed by the date stamp. And then the backup limit is 3. And so we made 5 backups for each of our tags. Now we're going to compress that down to only 3 backups by running this script. And then what this has is a loop that goes in and says, first, let me go out and list all the repositories on that registry. If you're doing a lot of registries, they won't actually allow this to go through. So you have to pass a list in there. But for this, we can, for the registry :2 image, it supports this API call. And then within each one of those registries we have, it's going to list all the tags in there. So we get all the tags we have within each repo. And then we look to see if any of those match that backup expression. And for each one of those, we keep track of that and keep track of not just that we got a backup tag there, but also what was the original backup in there, because it's like backup-latest. So we keep track of, okay, here's one of the backups for that latest tag. And then we check for each one of those backup tags that we kept or tracked, did any one of them exceed the 3 backup limit that we had? And if it did, then we go ahead and compress that down to only having 3 of them left. Now, when I'm doing something like this, and I'm going out deleting something from a registry or doing any kind of command that runs this crazy Lua script, what I like to do is a dry run option. And so this command looks a little similar to what we were doing before. It's on the host network. It's got the regbot.yml passed in, like we had the reg sync passed in before. And I've got the regbot latest image that we're running. And then I've got the config passed in, the once option, and then that dry run flag. If that looks good, if it outputs something that looks like what we were expecting to see, take the dry run off, and then it runs this cleanup right now. And so if you've filled up your registry and you're like, I need to clean this up right now. I don't want to wait for this time frame to come around because it's going to wait for that 1 hour to pass before it does anything. You do this once option, it kicks it right off. And then similar before, we get rid of the -rm option, IT, and we actually put a restart policy, throw it in the background and run it with a server flag. And this thing will just stay running, just like we did with the regsync, but we did it with the regbot command. Okay, whole bunch of stuff going on here. Let's actually see this thing in operation. So here's that regbot.yml. And that YAML file, just like we were seeing previously, it's got the creds, it's got the defaults, it's got that big long Lua script in there, which if you've never seen Lua, the double dashes in there, that's a comment. So that might help you read that file a little better. And so now let me kick it off the dry run. And we see we got 6 images we're cleaning up. That was 3 different images. Each one of them had 2 extra that we need to clean up. So it's getting rid of the 2 oldest ones for each one. That looked good. So I just reran that without the dry run options. Now we got rid of those. We actually did the delete at that point. And then I kick it off with the server. And so now before we had the reg sync and the registry, now we have the regbot, reg sync, and the registry going. And I know I'm running through this stuff fast. I do have all this stuff. All these slides are up online, so you can pull the slides down later on and actually go through it. And because it's the workshop, you've got that README file, you can actually run these commands yourself and see these things going as well. So I would hopefully by having all that, it'll help you out. So garbage collection. We got rid of the tags, but there's actually still stuff up on the registry. And that's because what we did was we got rid of the pointer, but we didn't get rid of all of the actual layers underneath that we might even point to. And you can't just delete all the layers willy-nilly, because you can have one image and a second image that both share the same tags. And if you delete one, you don't want to delete the tags for that first image, right? Because we have that ability to reuse those tags. So this actually does some intelligence in seeing, are those tags, are those lower level layers no longer used? Okay, no one's pointing to them. Now we can finally clean them up. So I run this command. Important details on this command. This is going in, executing in the registry and doing this garbage collect command within the registry. You don't want to run this during an image push, because if you do that, you might delete the layer that's you're trying to push and push a new image up to the registry. So common methods to handle that, you do it when it's read only, or you do it when the registry is stopped. So then you could spin up another container that had this command in it for the command that's going to run on the same volume. Or you run it during idle time. So if you have like an overnight window, you know nothing's going to do a push up to your registry, kick it off then in a schedule. So from here, what I can do is I can then list those tags again. So again, we're seeing those commands I'll get ready to show you in the demo. From here, you'll see that those are now all deleted. And let's see with that in action. So here's that exec command. This is going to output a whole bunch of stuff. I'm going to try to go back and look and see what's going on here. But what you can see is this just gives you a whole bunch of output here to look through to know that it actually validated that things were able to be deleted, and it went through and actually did some deletions behind the scenes. And then if I do that tag ls command, because I don't want to try to sort out all that file there, I'm now down to only my 3 backups for each one of my tags. And so backup version 3 and backup latest on the Alpine image only have 3 backups, and only 3 backups for that BusyBox latest. So that's how we know we actually did that cleanup there, and it went through the back, behind the scenes and got rid of all the unused blobs at that point. In our case, I think the blobs are still being used because the latest image is still pointing there, and these are all copies of each other. But in production, you'll see stuff that actually gets cleaned up. All right. So for anybody playing along at home that says, okay, that was great, I don't want to clutter up my local machine, I'll just give you these commands. That's how you can do the deletion, clean things up, making your environment look prettier. And just for proof that I did this locally and that there was nothing else in there, I spun this up in a little clean, isolated environment. So stop those containers. You want to get rid of the evidence here, show that you didn't have this workflow here. You remove the containers, and then there was just the one volume that was left over. And so the registry-data, you clean it up, and now the whole demo here that you worked through is all gone. But yeah, the workshop, I did have a link posted earlier, so feel free to check that out, play around with it locally, see how it goes. And in wrapping up, what I wanted to point out was that, what we did was we started a local registry. We copied images with names that were matching the upstream names. So that was kind of important, because in our next step, when we did that registry passing that arg, by keeping those paths identical between the two, we can just change that arg to change the registry name. And now we're building from our local mirror instead of the upstream registry. We can push images using our namespace, so we don't have to worry about colliding with something upstream, someone doing something different. And then for any of the unneeded images, we can now go through, delete old images, garbage collect from the registry, using that regbot command to clean stuff up, and then the registry specific garbage collection. And so by combining those two, you can maintain and get rid of some of those old tags out there, get rid of the old images. So We actually finished up a few minutes early. I guess I didn't have to make those demos go as fast as I did. For anybody playing along at home, the whole presentation is up online. It's up on GitHub. I've got the reg client repo. If you want to look at some of those commands we were playing around with, the regbot, the regsync, the regcuddle, all those are up under reg client. And that QR code is going to take care of these presentations where you can go back, replay them. All those demos and everything are up in the slides, so you can watch those on your leisure and see what happened there. Okay, and what I'll do is I'll keep an eye on the chat for a little bit, and I'll answer any questions that pop up down there. And then, yeah.
That's great. Brendan, thanks so much. This was awesome presentation. Yeah, we have 5 minutes, so
I know. I was trying to figure out if there was anybody that had a live question here.
So yeah, just go ahead and answer some questions from folks.
Yeah, I see people asking for the recording. I'm pretty sure, William, you are recording even over here, right?
Yes. So all sessions are recorded and they will be shared on our Docker's YouTube channel sometime next week.
Okay. And then volume backup automations. I don't have that automated yet. That would be a great little future capability. So Pablo, if you want to try something out to do something along those lines, that would be a great new feature. A lot of the stuff I'm working on doesn't even touch the Docker engine. We're talking directly to the registry. And so I haven't gotten into the specific on the volumes themselves. But if you start doing volume backups to a registry, there's ways you can push other things up to a registry other than just images. Then that would be a good use for doing something like this. And let's see. So you can email the links and all the recordings. So all the stuff up here in my links, you got them here on the last page. And let's see, any other questions? And yeah, people imagine how much garbage there. I've seen a lot of people that run this stuff and they start deleting a lot. So they'll find out that a lot of images get deleted suddenly. So there's a lot of stuff that clutters up a registry over a long period of time when you're running it. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and jump on off. I'll still stick around there in the chat box here later on. So if anybody has questions, and of course, follow later on. If you're looking at the recording, feel free to ping me over on Twitter or open up an issue over there on GitHub if you've got any other questions. Thanks so much, everyone.